Hey, welcome to Marathon 107. I really appreciate you clicking on the video. I've got 3 stories. All 3 of them are kind of fun. They're 3 fun stories, and I hope you enjoy these. And I was going to do the birthday thing at the end of this marathon, but I'm actually out of time. I got to get this video edited and get it uploaded. So we'll put the birthdays in the next marathon I do, and that might be a week or so away because I've got 6 interviews that I've already recorded, and I'm going to be editing and releasing those over the next 10 or 12 days. So this is going to be a great video, and I hope you enjoy it. All right, here we go.
I've got local fees to a restless soul, and I walk these streets, fire in my heart, it won't go cold.
Here's a story from Kathy. Kathy, thanks so much for sending this story. I really enjoyed it. And you've sent several emails, and thank you for sending all those stories to me, but I'm finally getting to one. It's actually your latest. I thought it was so good, I wanted to pull it up and get it in a video. And here's what Kathy writes. My husband and I listen to you every night after we settle down for the night, at least for the nights that you are on, and we miss you when you are not. We love the music you play on your show and your sense of humor. We are great fans, and thanks for your program. Well, thank you both for watching. I don't think I'm that great. I'm just reading stories, but I'm glad you enjoy it. It really makes me feel good. She writes, I've had many experiences and some stories that I can share with you. I hope you don't get tired of me. This is a story that was shared with me. She was the sister of a coworker, and my coworker's name is Tina, and her sister is Susie. In 1974, I lived and worked in Lakeland, Florida for the original Red Lobster restaurant. My coworker told me that her sister was coming in to have lunch with us and was excited about something that had happened to them, and she wanted to share it with us. Here is a little background. My friend's brother-in-law was a forest ranger and was stationed in the Hiloche, H-I-L-O-C-H-E-E, Hiloche Wildlife Preserve, east of Lakeland and south of Highway 4. They had a little piece of land that backed up to the forest proper, and they put a nice double-wide manufactured home there. It was fenced in, nice and snug, with chain-link fence. Her husband, Paul, was in the tower most every day for 8 to 10 hours, except when he had to check on various issues and came home for lunch. This arrangement was great because he could see their home from the tower, and it was walking or bicycle distance from the tower. They had a 4-year-old son who was very precious, busy little guy, and often talked of his buddy that he played with and talked to all the time in the backyard. His mom assumed that it was an imaginary friend. Susie came by for lunch. The 3 of us sat in the back corner for a private lunch to talk and visit. After we ordered, Susie told us of how for the better part of 6 months, her son talked all the time about his buddy in the backyard. He could hardly wait to go outside and play, and he would sit at the sliding glass doors staring outside, sometimes crying that his buddy would miss him when it rained and he wouldn't go outside to play. A couple of weeks before this lunch meeting, Susie said that her son went right out to play after breakfast and was on his big wheel, squealing with delight and zooming around the backyard, so she went about her housework. The backyard was assumed by the parents to be completely safe. There was a 6-foot chain-link fence around the backyard with a gate on either side of the house, and those gates were always locked. The forest was just a few feet past the fence on the back side, and on the north side, it was about 50 yards away. They felt like they were in a safe spot. There were many sources of play items in the fenced yard. There was a swing set made of wood, and there were multiple riding toys. There were balls and even a pebble box. When her son went out to play most of the time, she kept the glass sliding door open so she could hear her son. Susie was busy at that time mopping, and she heard her son laughing and saying, "You can't catch me, you can't catch me." And he laughed and he laughed. This sort of laughter from a child always makes the parents happy, but she thought she heard another child laughing out in the yard. It didn't sound like her son at all. She walked to the door to see who else was in the yard, and she dropped her mop. What she saw shattered the day. There was a small, hairy boy, a little bigger than her son, pedaling another one of the big-wheel trikes chasing after her son, and they were both laughing and having a great time. She opened the door and she rushed out. At that moment, the mama of the hairy little boy saw Susie come out of the door, and she rushed from the shadows of the forest, leaped over the fence with ease, ran to her son, snatched him off the trike, turned around, and looked at Susie. Susie jerked her son and held him, and they both ran in different directions. Susie to the house and Mrs. Sasquatch to the woods. Out of breath and her heart pounding, Susie sat on the dining room chair holding her son, who was now yelling and crying about how she had scared off his friend. He broke free from her embrace and ran to the sliding rear door, yelling, hey buddy, come back!" At which point Susie snatched her son away from the glass and scolded him, saying that he was not to play with Buddy ever again. Susie then described fully what she saw. A little child Sasquatch with no hair about its face or hands. Its hands were firmly able to grip the handlebars of the trike, and its feet were pedaling like any other child. She recalled that the young Sasquatch was laughing and talking. Even more strange, apparently her son understood him. They understood each other. Its hair was not terribly long, but it was brownish blonde with a reddish tint from the sun. The mother was similar but darker brown and had more hair, but while she had hair on her chest, it was sparse there, and there was no hair on her face. She had a flat nose, she had dark brown eyes, and a pinkish tongue with white teeth with some yellowing. She recalled clicking sounds the mama made, and her child responded in kind. She also noted that both her son and the hairy child seemed to call out the same words to each other. And the two kids, they actually called each other Buddy. Susie said she called her husband and told him what happened. From the tower, he looked through his powerful binoculars, looking at the back portion of their property going back into the forest, and he didn't see anything. He called additional forest rangers and his superiors, and that started a search, but nothing concrete was ever found except some faint tracks. After that, Susie and her husband put an 8-foot wooden privacy fence across the back, but she said that her son was despondent over the loss of his buddy, and from that day forward he lost interest in playing in the backyard. Susie said that she feels guilty for ruining his happiness. Wow, what a great story. I don't think she should feel guilty about that. I mean, I don't think I'd let my kids play with wild animals in the backyard. Maybe a domestic animal, but not a Bigfoot. I think Susie made the right choice. But that is such an odd story that it describes a small, young Bigfoot that actually has a vocabulary. I've never heard that before. The clicking and all I've heard, but the English language, I've never heard that before. So that's really cool. Kathy, thank you for sending that. Hopefully I'll be able to get to some of your other stories. I'd love to, but there's a lot of people that I haven't read yet, so just stand by. But anyway, thanks for the story. It was fantastic. Thanks, Kathy. Here's an email from Claude. I was born in 1948, and I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Yep, I was a city kid. However, my dad was a country boy raised in the woods in Pride, Louisiana. He was born in 1926, the oldest of 7 kids. He plowed the family garden with an old mule. I remember that this mule liked to eat leftover rice and gravy. My father had to wait until the mule finished eating and quickly grab the bowl because the mule would paw at it when it was empty. He learned to hunt and fish as a way to put food on the table because store-bought meat was something they couldn't afford. They raised chickens and they had a milk cow, but that was it. Everything else came from the garden except for staple goods like seasonings and flour. His father would give him 2 shotgun shells and tell him to bring back 2 of something, squirrels, doves, rabbits, and don't miss, those shells aren't cheap. When he was 17, just after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, he dropped out of school and enlisted in the Navy, to later become a radio operator on board the USS Copiahe, a tanker that had been converted into an aircraft carrier. As well as other training, he was taught the expert use of the M1 rifle. That knowledge stayed with him all of his life, and he passed it on to me. That is the way he taught me to handle a gun and hunt when I was about 10 years old. I had inherited my mother's 410 bolt-action Ranger brand shotgun, and I was an excellent shot by the time I was 11. He hunted with an L.C. Smith 12-gauge double-barrel shotgun. My oldest son now has both of them. Most of our hunting was small game on private or family property until he joined the Ole Miss Hunting Club in 1965 when I was about 16 years old. He had gained a fondness for deer hunting. The club hunted the Racorsi Point area on the Mississippi River north of Morganza, Louisiana. There were 23,000 acres of land in that lease, mostly river bottom land, with several kinds of oaks, hickory trees, pecans, sweet gums, and almost no pines. It was prime deer hunting. I bet you had cypress trees in there too, Claude. I hunted with my 410, and I had strict rules that went with the use of that gun. No playing with it, clean it after I took it out, whether I had fired it or not, and if I wasn't hunting, it stayed put up. We spent many weekends at the lease, hunting squirrels, rabbits, and of course deer. The club had about 250 members, and there were 5 camps. Ours was the largest camp, built by expert carpenters who were members. Luckily, not all of the members liked to camp, so there was always room in the bunkhouse-style bedroom. There were 6 sets of bunks along either wall and a walkway down the middle. The only other room was the kitchen that had 1 eating table that would seat about 8 people. The rest of us would sit in folding chairs or wherever we could when the camp was full of hunters. There was no electricity, so the camp was lighted with Coleman lanterns, and the stove was fueled by propane. There were ice chests everywhere, mostly full of beer and lunch meat for sandwiches, and there was an outhouse. Nights were filled with the old men drinking beer and playing boo-ray. That's a Cajun card game. I wasn't interested in either, so I usually went to bed early, dreaming about the coming hunt the next morning. One weekend, one of the members went to another camp to play cards, leaving his son at our camp. His name was Pancho. Roxy! His name... Oh my gosh. His name was Pancho, and that was his nickname, and he was about my age, and we struck up a friendship. Neither one of us was interested in watching a bunch of old men drink and play cards, so we decided to walk to the other camp just to pass the time. The other camp was 5 miles down a moonlit gravel road. We didn't feel the need to take a gun. There was nothing out there to fear, just deer, squirrels, and rabbits. Or so we thought. There had never been any sightings of predators. So off we went without a flashlight, but carrying a 6-inch blade case skinning knife that stayed in my pocket all the time. Like most young boys, we cut up and laughed and talked about all sorts of things, girls, cars, hunting, and so on. The night was bright with moonlight, and the road was easy to see, so we didn't have any worries. We walked about a mile when we heard footsteps off in the woods beside us. These were thick woods, not easy to walk through in broad daylight, much less in the dark. There were lots of briars and vines that would easily trip someone up, but someone or something was keeping up with our pace on the clear road. We stopped to listen, and so did whatever that was. We started walking again, and so did this person or animal. We talked and we walked and tried to decide what it was. A hunting dog that was lost? No, it would have come to us looking for food or friendship. Was it a deer? No, they're not that noisy when they walk. Could have been a cow. There's lots of those free-ranging out here. But it sounded like it was walking on 2 legs. Maybe one of the guys from the camp about to jump out and scare us. But if that was the case, they would have already done that. Once again, we stopped and it stopped. We walked and it walked. We stopped and it stopped, and on and on. Now I wished that I had brought my gun, or at least a light. I needed a weapon. My skinning knife was not much of a weapon, but it's all I had. I decided to stop and cut down a sapling and sharpen the end. That way I could at least keep some distance between me and whatever this was. Pancho said, "Just what do you think you're going to do with this sharp stick?" And I said, "If it attacks, I'm going to stab it and run with the spear in my hand, so try to keep up." I don't know if whatever it was understood what I was planning, but it stopped following us. We continued walking the rest of the 5 miles to the other camp with no further problems. And when we got there, his dad was still playing cards and would be for a while. We didn't tell him what happened, and he said that we must have been nuts or really bored to walk that far in the dark, and that we should start our walk home, and that he would pick us up when he drove back. We were mischievous boys, and as we heard him coming, we ducked off into the road, and he drove right by us. He was some kind of mad having to wait for us to walk all the way back. After that night, I never saw Pancho again. A month after this happened, I heard on a local TV station that a towboat pilot was shining the Mississippi River bank at night and had seen a large, dark, bipedal creature walking away from the river's edge in that same area. As a footnote, I now actively look for Sasquatch and had a sighting about a year ago. It was in the Kisatchie National Forest north of Alexandria, Louisiana. It was about 7 feet tall, covered in 4-inch long black hair. It was slender built, so I believe that it was a juvenile. Unfortunately, it was only a 3-second profile sighting. I got to watch it cross the road I was on about 100 yards away. I immediately went to see where it had gone, but the ground was so hard that I couldn't find any tracks. My search will continue as long as I am able. Claude, that's an awesome story. I mean, that's a great memory from way back, 1962. That's the year I was born. But I remember meeting other kids at deer camp when I was young, back in the late 60s, early 70s. We struck up friendships like that, and you have a great weekend or a whole week at deer camp, and you never see those guys again. You never hear from them, anything. You always wonder whatever happened to those guys. Some of the friends I made, I've never run into them again. You just never know. Those are fun weekends, and that's a fun story, Claude. Thanks for sending it to me, man. I really appreciate you. This story is from Steve, and I think it's awesome. So hang on here. Just hang on. This encounter took place in Maryland back in the summer of 1962. The knowledge of a Bigfoot creature was not common, and I never knew of their existence. Then this one special eventful day, my interaction with a strange creature was forever embedded deeply within my memories. It was not until years later that I learned exactly what it was that I had seen. Before getting into the details of my encounter, I want to give you a better picture of the environment as it was back in 1962. If you walked to the eastern end of the road that I lived on and made a left, you would be on a road going north that would dead end to the woods and continued north into the woods to a trail. The woods was about a mile wide north and south and many miles long east and west. By following the river, you would be able to enter the Patapsco Valley State Park completely indiscreet. Guys, I'm sorry about my pronunciation. The United States has chosen some of the weirdest names to give places, but they're probably good names. I just can't pronounce them, and you just got to deal with that. Proceeding down the trail about a half a mile into the woods, you had 3 choices. If you went to the right, you would run into a lake or swamp combo that was completely overrun by nature, making it difficult for most people to venture around the perimeter. My friends and I were probably the only teens that did this occasionally. It was worth the thrashing that we would have to endure by the weeds and thorns because you always ran into many animals, birds, reptiles, and other wildlife. Well, now back to the trail. My encounter took place in the early morning during the month of June in 1962, and I was 12 and a half years old. My closest friend and I would terrorize everything in the swamp and woods every day of our summer vacation, and after school hours when it was in season. We could not get enough of it. We had become very proficient with our air rifles, able to hit dragonflies right out of the air while flying. This one particular morning in June, as I went to get my friend for our daily ritual, he sadly said in protest that he had to go somewhere with his mother that day. I did not let that stop me, however, and to make him feel even worse, I reassured him that I was still going. I knew the sight of just watching me walk off into the woods while he could not would really haunt him through the day with his mother. With a smile on my face, I went to the end of our road, made the left, and entered the woods after proceeding past the dead end. When I got to the split, I looked right and left, deciding which way needed me the most. The swimming pond wasn't any fun for the horror that I was about to unleash on the swamp inhabitants, so I went to the left. I climbed up the embankment across the flat area and down the other side to the swamp. I stood there several minutes at the edge of the swamp, but then I realized that something immediately seemed different. Surprisingly, I didn't see or hear any wildlife or any of the usual chatter of the birds. The more I paid attention to the silence, the more it raised my curiosity. And then I suddenly had the strongest feeling that I was being watched. I can't explain it, but it was something that made me feel very uneasy. I started looking around into the woods, but I didn't see anything. It was not until I turned around 180 degrees with my back to the swamp and looked at the embankment that I had just descended. There, about 40 yards away and hugging a good-sized tree from behind, was this huge, hairy creature standing on two legs. Its arms were around the tree and it was facing me, leaning out to its left side from its midsection, keeping its lower body behind the tree, just peering around and watching me. It was not doing a good job of hiding because it was much wider than the 16-inch wide tree, and from my point of view, there was about a foot of exposed chest and shoulder on its left side and maybe 2 feet of its mass on the exposed right side where its head was. I was immediately taking all of this in, realizing it was much taller than any man I had ever seen and unbelievably huge and muscular. The body was covered with long brownish-colored hair, and only part of the upper chest and parts of the face were hairless. The head was big, and I thought to myself that the top of its large head looked like the end of a football. We stared at each other for what seemed like an eternity, and then for whatever brilliant reasoning on my part, in an attempt to scare it away, I raised my Sheridan Blue Streak air rifle, which was pumped to the max. I shot and hit the creature in the most exposed part of its chest, and to my amazement, it didn't even flinch. Not a good idea, I thought, but I knew that it had to hurt because I have to say that my Sheridan was one of, if not the most powerful air rifles available during that time, and it was able to pierce a metal milk can. If you've ever shot a BB or pellet rifle in the sunlight, you can sometimes see the sun reflecting on the projectile as it's being propelled to the target. This is what happened that day. I could see the pellet all the way until it hit the creature. Now, if once wasn't enough, after seeing my shot had no effect on this creature, me and all my infinite teen knowledge that I could muster, I decided to shoot it again, and so I did. I saw the .20 caliber pellet hit in just about the same spot on its exposed chest. When I saw that this shot had no effect either, my immediate thought was, why in the heck did I just do that? Then, to show me that I was having the right thought, the creature stepped out from behind the tree, showing me just how massive he was, and also to imply, that didn't hurt a bit, boy. I now say descriptively he because when he stepped from behind the tree, my golf ball-sized eyes dropped from his head and chest and realized that it was definitely a male. I could not look away or believe what I was seeing. Was he offering me a new target? I quickly dismissed this thought because up to now he was not aggressive, and I knew that if I took that third shot at his newly revealed lower region, that this would end very badly for me. Oh my gosh, this vision just popped in my head, and I can see this kid going, should I shoot it or should I not? Okay, let's get on with the story. That was all that I needed, because then I realized that I needed a good new plan fast. My first plan had failed of trying to get this thing to run away so I could get out of there by my same trail home that I had come in on. To make matters even worse, I think I only had succeeded in pissing this huge creature off, and just to be sure that I had accomplished that, and to be sure it was absolutely pissed off, I had shot it that second time. I avoided taking that tempting third shot, and my new plan was very simple: run like hell. I had only one other option as an avenue of escape, and that was to go into the woods to the north towards the swimming lake and get to that housing community on the other side. It was not a decision that I wanted to make, but under the circumstances, with the doubly shot, pissed off big hairy creature, I know what they say about running from an animal and being chased as prey. Despite this, I was out of options, so I immediately ran and lit up that trail and probably amazed that creature so much that if it was capable of thought, it was probably thinking, I never knew they could move that fast. I probably resembled the cartoon character the Roadrunner burning a trail out of there. I made that trip in record time, even though it dumped me out miles away from home. I was happy, just happy, to again see people, and the fact that the creature did not chase me or retaliate for me giving it such a whipping. It probably just dismissed everything as it walked casually away and thought, what a stupid kid, and just decided to just leave me alone, and probably shaking its head at our encounter as it departed, happy to have its own story to tell to its own family. But this story does not end here. When I safely got back home, I began rounding up some friends, and after several hours of convincing them that I was not crazy, 6 fearless or stupid teenage warriors went back to the woods equipped with air guns and baseball bats. Our scouring the woods by the swamp did not reveal the creature, and I was not disappointed because I was afraid it would still be hacked off at me, remembering that I was the one that shot it. During our search, we did find an obvious bedding area that was made from soft pine branches carefully arranged, and they were completely mashed down. The location of this bed was at the top of an embankment just off the trail that I had walked on to get to the swamp that morning. I think I had walked right past it. The creature may have been hiding, laying there sleeping, and seeing me, it was probably hiding and staying out of view. I don't know where it was and where it came from into the woods that morning, but the bed was in perfect strategic location to see the trails in the surrounding area. I've since moved to another state, but during a trip back to Maryland in 2015, I revisited that area. I parked my car where the woods once were, now a new subdivided housing parking lot which was built right next to that swamp, and on top of the now filled-in swimming lake, which gave way to this project. I had a tear in my eye as I walked over to what was left of the swamp where my encounter took place, and which had occupied so much of my time as a typical young boy growing up. Only a small defiant and disrespected area of the swamp still remained, and only a hint of what it once was. It was now home to litter and discarded items unwanted by the housing community. I was completely shocked that with the addition of the new roads and all the lakes that had been filled in and built with this housing projects, woods cut, and the erection of 2 churches, 3 schools, and a library on that property, that this small area was still even there. Amazingly, that the exact spot where I had stood at the edge of the swamp that eventful day had survived for whatever reason despite all the human encroachment and development. I walked over to the remaining swamp and I stood in the exact spot at the edge of the swamp where I stood in 1962, and then I began turning the 180 degrees, not knowing what to expect or what I would see. I completed the turn the same as I had done that special day, and to my surprise, standing on that hill, there like a monument, was the same tree, but this time it was standing alone. As I looked at the tree, I got a cold chill and noticed that it was now a little wider around its midsection, but then again, so am I. You can use my story and my name. I have nothing to hide. I have remained an active hunter throughout my life and spent many, many hours in the woods gaining much respect for the animals and nature. Regrettably, I never saw anything like that again, though every day I regret shooting that Bigfoot and wish that I could have just thrown it an apple from my lunch bag instead. I respect the fact that this creature remained calm and did not retaliate for my poor decisions, and thank God that I did not take that third shot. Oh, there is nothing else I can add to that story. What a wonderful story. Steve, thank you for sending that. I told you in a response email that I liked it, and I had only read a couple of sentences, but I could tell where this story was going. It was awesome, buddy. Thank you for sending it to me. Thank you all for listening. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed those stories, and I hope you would like to come back and listen to some more videos. I really appreciate you, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.